Hi, I'm Marie, and here I review books, mostly fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. Today I'm going to talk about Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a book where throughout most of my reading I didn't know where it was going, but by the end I realized that that was kind of part of the point. So I really loved this book, and my favorite part about it is that Madeline Miller created such an honest story about growth and becoming who you are and just the trajectory of life. Interestingly, even though the story is all about mostly gods, but she was still able to do that. And that's my favorite type of fiction, or what I like best about fiction, is when the characters feel real and the journey feels honest about the way that life is, even when it's in a fantasy realm with characters who may have magic. Going into this review, I just want to let everybody know that there will be spoilers, lots and lots of spoilers. So if you don't want any of that, then you should not watch this video. So in this story that is about becoming who you are and the growth, the journey that leads to this woman's capability to be who she wants to be and who she really is in her soul, there's some things that Miller does that I think present real honesty. So firstly is through her prose. Secondly is through the character that she's creating. And thirdly, through this feminist portrait. This honesty causes pain for the reader, I think, but it's sort of a pain that's worth it because it's part of what brings meaning to the book. And so I'm going to talk about what I mean by that and how that works in this video. So first, starting with the prose. The prose is honest in that it's vivid and clear in a way that allows you to really see what Madeline Miller wants you to. It feels real, like you can see a realism in the prose, even when we're talking about gods and magic and all that kind of thing. But when she's getting at life and emotions and the journey of living, and changing and the painful struggles that we go through, she does that with such vivid language and imagery that just feels real about what life is like. She has metaphors that hit so emotionally hard. It could just be a paragraph or a line, and it's just going to take you right to the heart of what she means, of a point that she's trying to make. And then just the rhythm of it in general is just, it flows really well. And it carries you along. So even though I wasn't sure where the story was going for so much of it, I just enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the way that she wrote it. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of these different things so you can understand where I'm coming from and why I'm saying this if you're not sure already. For rhythm, this is on page 71, and it's when Circe is talking to her brother about turning Scylla into a monster, and just his way of telling her what he thinks about that situation is part of what I mean when I just say that I think the rhythm like carries you and it flows. Her sentences are pretty short, but they're clear and they don't feel choppy. They feel like they're bringing you along through the character's train of thought in a way that makes me want to just keep reading. Circe's brother says, "Think, what would an ugly nymph do in our halls? What is the worth of her life?" It was like the old days, him asking and me without answers. I don't know. Of course you do. It's why it would have been a good punishment. Even the most beautiful nymph is largely useless, and an ugly one would be nothing, less than nothing. She would never marry or produce children. She would be a burden to her family, a stain upon the face of the world. She would live in the shadows, scorned and reviled. But a monster, he said, she always has a place. She may have all the glory her teeth can snatch. She will not be loved for it, but she will not be constrained either. So whatever foolish sorrow you harbor, forget it. I think it may be said that you improved her. So, yeah, I just really like the rhythm of that in the way that he says it. We can also look at some vivid imagery as well. Early on page 9, when Circe is still pretty young and she has her younger sister and brother there, and they are basically just constantly insulting her. So she gives an example of this. So first it's going to be her sister's insults, and then it's going to be Circe's description of that. Her eyes are yellow as piss. Her voice is screechy as an owl. She is called Hawk, but she should be called Goat for her ugliness. Those were the earliest attempts at barbs, still dull, but day by day they sharpened. I just think that's a perfect description of insults and how they get worse. This other example of pretty vivid imagery that I think feels true has to do with her description of the gods and how they conceive prophecy. Among the gods there are few who have the gift of prophecy, the ability to peer into the murk and glimpse what fates will come. Not everything may be foreseen. Most gods and mortals have lives that are tied to nothing. They tangle and wend, now here, now there, according to no set plan. But then there are those who wear their destinies like nooses, whose lives run straight as planks, however they try to twist. It is these that our prophets may see. I just think that's a great description of different types of life. Here's two metaphors that hit pretty hard. This one is about after Icarus dies, and she's talking about Daedalus. Daedalus did not long outlive his son. His limbs turned gray and nerveless, and all his strength was transmuted into smoke. I had no right to claim him, I knew it. But in a solitary life, there are rare moments when another soul dips near yours, as stars once a year brush the earth. Such a constellation was he to me. This metaphorical moment is when Circe's son wants to go home, and she's talking about his fear. He never said, "What if I go home and all of it is ash?" But I saw the thought in him, living like a second body and feeding in the dark. Basically, the writing just really hit me, and it was emotional for me. It flowed well, and I could see the things that were happening. Besides the prose, the characterization of Circe herself, I found an extremely honest portrait of just this life where this woman is growing into accepting herself. This book is way more of a character study, I would say, than a plot-driven novel, which is why I wasn't sure where it was going for a lot of it. But that character study is done so well. This character study is about Circe learning and growing and accepting. First, she becomes a witch, and she has to learn to build her power and love her power and not see it as something that's less than what the magic of the gods around her. She has to see it as something valuable in herself that she can do so much with, and she does slowly build this and learn it throughout the story. She also learns relationship values. Early on, she just wants to be with somebody. She just doesn't want to be alone. She's so lonely. But she goes through multiple short relationships that are all with people who aren't very great and who are taking from her, are taking what they need from her. And even though she feels like she's getting a little bit out of it, she's not really. They're not the people she would really want to be with. She just accepts them because they show up, because they're there. And throughout this story, she learns who she is, which allows her to choose who she wants in the end. And to choose somebody who she wants because of the support they give her, and not somebody who just takes from her. One of the biggest points of the story that she learns is also to love humanity. She loves humanity right from the start. She values it. She values human life and is interested in humans. But all around her, everyone sees it as worthless and below them. And it takes her a long time to accept that it's something meaningful to her and valuable to her, and that to accept herself is to also accept the value she sees in humanity, and to finally become like a human, become human. And in drinking that potion at the end, that last moment is her final full self-acceptance through her value of humanity and human life. Along with her growth are her flaws, and her flaws are realistic as well. She can be selfish, she can be naive, she can be brutal at times. Miller doesn't pull her punches. Sometimes Circe is unlikable, and she can be cruel. I don't think Miller was trying to create a character that we all would just love throughout the story. A lot of times in fiction, I see characters who the author wants to give flaws so that they feel fleshed out, but they also want you to like the character, so their flaws are a little bit on the surface, like the bad boy with the heart of gold, where his badness isn't even really bad, it's like nothing at all. Those kinds of flaws, and Miller does not do this. Circe, the parts that bothered me the most about her, that I found the most aggravating, were when she was weak. When she goes to her sister to help with the baby, I was angry with her because the sister was just so horrible to her, and there was no reason to even think. The sister gave no reason for Circe to believe that anything would be different when she went there to help her. And I could not understand at all why she would want to help the sister, even though she got to leave the island. That would have been the only reason, but she seems like she genuinely does want to go to help her sister as well. And so certain scenes like that, certain instances like that, she can be annoying or aggravating, but it didn't make me not like her as a character overall. I enjoyed her growth and her story, and she was tough at times when she needed to be, and as she grew. And she was also a pretty decent person at the end of the day, even though she did do some brutal things. She was so much more decent than everyone around her. The third point of honesty that I think Miller gives us is with this feminist portrait of Circe. It's a real picture of a woman's life when she grows through a solitary experience. So much of the story, Circe is alone, or she can't connect with the people who she's around, or the people who she's around treat her poorly. And she doesn't have that story where she gets into a relationship when she's young, and this long-term relationship is part of what forms her and part of so much of her values that I feel like I see in so much other fiction that involves women. She doesn't even really have friendships for the majority of the story. She starts to become friends with Odysseus's wife at the end, but besides that, she doesn't really have any friends. And I think this is such a unique but real situation for some women. So to show this life of a woman who kind of is on her own and grows by herself. She's in a world where she's still controlled by men. She has to stay on that island because of men. And men show up on that island and pretty much do what they want for the majority of the story. So that control isn't gone, but she's alone and independent for so much of it, and she grows through her own independence in a lot of the story. And this just isn't something that I see a lot, and I think is a really interesting portrayal of a woman's life. I know some people don't see this story as being very feminist, but I really don't understand how you can't see that. It's pretty obvious to me with the sort of patriarchal nature of the world that they live in. And as I said in the last part, she ends up through that journey, through that independent growth, and kind of going through these different short-term relationships where she comes to understand men. She is finally able to choose a partner who she values because he supports her and not from what he takes from her. And she has to grow into herself and become herself and accept the things that she truly values rather than the things that everyone around her is like the values that everyone around her is pushing on her. She has to live her own values before she can make this choice and choose the partner for herself that will be authentic to the life she wants to live. Even with my value of honesty, there were some things that I didn't like about this story, although I do think those things, they fit with Miller's honesty throughout the entire novel. For one, the plot, as I said, I didn't know where it was going for so much of the story, and I did find myself unmoored and the plot to be meandering through a lot of it. I generally don't like that. I know it's a literary fiction sort of thing, but usually I want a more structured plot and like an aim and a goal that I feel like the story is moving towards. But as I said, the prose and the characterization in this story carried me along even with so little of a structured plot. For my last point of dislike was just how punishing the story was for Circe. Now, I can love a dark book. The First Law trilogy is my favorite books of all time. I can deal with darkness and tragedy in novels, but even in comparison to the First Law, I feel like the punishment just didn't let up for Circe. She is beat down for this whole story, and she's weak for a lot of it, and she doesn't stand up for herself for so much of it, to the point where I was becoming exhausted by the end. When she finally has her kid, and then it's just so tormenting, and she's not connecting with him, and it's just such more of a struggle for her, and it just, especially early on, seems like she doesn't get anything from her child that she wanted for all this time. I just felt like I was in pain, and I was just like, can we give her a break? Please, can the character just have a break for once? And I do think Miller does give some breathing room in this book. There are parts where Circe does fight back. When she does first get to the island and she's able to have that freedom and build her powers and her magic, there's enjoyment there, and there's other times where she has some enjoyment and she shows power, but it's not that much, and the punishment is a lot of being beat down. So I did find that hard to kind of continue to go through. Again, it really hit me when she had the kid. That's when I was struggling the most. But I was able to keep going. I'm glad that I did, because it does end in a place that I just really loved. I loved that she was able to accept so much of herself, and she it was interesting because she changes so much throughout the story, but it does feel like her core values and her core being remains, and part of her changes are the things that she's able to do to grow to grow those core pieces of herself, and to hold on to those, and to build a life that allows her to live her own values. And that's really what I find special about this book. And the ending really just was emotional for me, and I was completely satisfied with it, and I was happy for her, and I felt like the story came together at the end in a way that made me really think about life, and life and the struggles of life, and what we're building and what it takes. So it was totally worth it to come away thinking about those ideas. So again, I started this book. I didn't know where I was going for so much of it, but it was the story of a life, and in life we pretty much don't know where we're going. And at the end of it, I found that it was a true look at a person's journey of self-discovery and growth.